Today, I'm going to tell you a story about the Hunt brothers. You can look up more about the Hunt brothers on Google for further reading. This family was originally from Illinois and rose to prominence in Texas. In the mid-20th century, their family discovered oil fields in Texas. Texas had lots of private oil wells. They found some there and got rich overnight. So the old Hunt, named Harrelson Lafayette, ended up marrying 3 wives, house number 1, house number 2, and house number 3. He had 15 children, all of whom were raised quite well. Among them, 2 of the children from the first wife became the main heirs. The sons from the first wife were the Hunt brothers. One was named Bunker, and the other was named Herbert. The Hunt brothers, Bunker and Herbert, led the U.S. silver bull market that began in 1974. It was way crazier than today. Before they made their move, silver, I've told you before, was always around $1, just about $1 US. After World War II, it stayed about $1. By 1974, the 2 of them started buying slowly, bit by bit, and they ended up buying 55 million ounces. 55 million ounces of silver ended up in the hands of the Hunt brothers. Because they were oil tycoons and had the money, they bought 55 million ounces, which caused the COMEX silver price to rise from around 1.5 to 6 per ounce. In other words, it went from the 1 to 1.5 range before 1970 till 1974. $6 per ounce of silver. Remember these key figures. Then the 2 of them started to get a bit carried away because they had made a huge amount of money. 55 million ounces. The 2 of them were worried that the US government might play dirty and confiscate their silver because back in the 1930s and 1940s, the US government had indeed played dirty before, confiscating everyone's gold. So, at that time, the US government took all the gold from American citizens, and it was illegal for any private individual in the US to own gold. This was the case before and after the war, so the Hunt brothers were worried their silver would be confiscated as well. That's why they used their own planes to transport load after load of silver to underground vaults in Zurich, Switzerland, in the Alps. They transported it into the vaults, and even hired the best gunmen from Texas to escort the shipments. 20 sharpshooters were chosen to guard the Hunt brothers' purchase of 55 million ounces of silver. The price of silver then skyrocketed from 1.5 to 6. The Hunt brothers had become the richest men in America. The richest person in America was Hunt back then. Hunt felt that saving in US dollars didn't seem very reliable. At that time, America's national strength wasn't as great as it would later become. In 1974, the US was in turmoil after the Vietnam War. It was a bit like today, once again in a state of uncertainty. So, Hunt made up his mind to take things seriously. He decided to buy up all the silver in the world and push the price up to where he believed it should be. Because gold was being held down at 35 by the US government, he had no choice. But he was also worried that the US government might suppress silver as well. So he decided to ship the silver to Switzerland. This was the process, you see. At that time, rumors were spreading wildly around the world that the Hunt brothers were going to take all of America's silver market and even monopolize the global silver market. So, what was the annual silver production in 1974? It was 245 million ounces. And what was the global annual demand for silver? The demand was 450 million ounces. Listen to these numbers. Now, let's immediately use AI to check. What is the current global demand for silver? And what is the current production? It's exactly the same. Silver production cannot be expanded. Don't listen to those people talking nonsense, as if silver were iron ore or copper ore. It's extremely difficult to increase the production of gold and silver. Very difficult. There just isn't that much. And most of it is a byproduct. To get silver, you have to extract a huge amount of copper. So, it is usually found together with gold or with copper. So silver is basically always mined as an associated mineral. The annual production of silver has always lagged behind the annual demand for silver, and that's the key issue. So the Hunt brothers decided to go after silver. You might ask, why didn't they go after gold? Let me tell you again, the Hunt brothers were smarter than me because they were the richest people in America. The reason the Hunt brothers didn't go after gold was because the US government was playing dirty at the time. After the Bretton Woods system, it was illegal for any American to buy gold, no matter if you were the richest person or not. So they had to settle for the next best thing. Got it? Then someone asks, if these two brothers were buying recklessly, how much silver does the US or the world have available for them? I mean, they've already bought 5,500 ounces. How much could the US actually provide? Weren't they trying to squeeze the market as much as possible? So, how much could we actually give them? Even if I gave them everything, if you do the math, the maximum would be 200 million ounces, including all private reserves in the United States. There are only 200 million ounces. Damn, he's already bought 55 million ounces. There are just 200 million ounces left. So the situation is already clear now. It's already clear who will win and who will lose. The Hunt brothers really could come up with that much money, especially if the price was around $6. So the Hunts flew to New York to rally support, to gather their forces. He gave a speech at COMEX. Hunt himself was basically like Elon Musk. In his speech, he said, almost anything in this world is better than holding a $1 bill. He meant that even the US dollar, the little green bills, the green paper, almost anything is more valuable than that. Because even an idiot knows how to use the printing press. What he meant was that silver, gold, or anything at all, even pots and pans, are all more valuable than this because they can just print this stuff recklessly. At that time, the US was indeed running a huge deficit. By March 1975, even Hunt's money wasn't enough because the price of silver started to fall again, just like it's being hammered down today. Then Hunt had to keep adding margin. He was using leverage too, and that's a key reason for his downfall. Then what did he do when he ran out of money? He flew to Tehran to see the then Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Yes, that's the Shah, whose son is now trying to restore the monarchy. He went to see his father, the one who hadn't been overthrown yet. He went to see him. You're right, gold is a byproduct. It's an associated mineral of pyrite and copper ore. I mean, I've actually acquired gold companies myself, damn it, so how could I not know? Even if I'm not an expert, I still know these things. I mean, I've never actually slaughtered a pig, but I'm someone who sells pork, you know? So, the general situation with pigs, the butchers have told me all about it. Alright, let's continue. Although the two brothers didn't have enough cash on hand, they went to the Shah of Iran, Pahlavi, and got him to join forces with them. They told him stories, saying that as long as we join together to buy silver, we can make him liquidate his small amount of silver. Basically, it's called a short squeeze, forcing them to jump out the window, haha. And, silver wouldn't just be $6 anymore. We could push it up to $60 if we wanted to. You see, didn't Iran also have money again? Isn't this a great opportunity for us? But the Shah didn't really understand, so he had his finance minister talk in detail with the Hunt brothers. That's normal. The finance minister would discuss the details. The finance minister, an Iranian noble, directly asked Hunt, how much did you make last year? Hunt hesitated for a moment and said, about $50 million. The finance minister immediately refused to cooperate with him. Here are two key points. What kind of cultural difference is this? First, he hesitated because there was no trust or familiarity between them. Oh, the fact that you hesitated shows you have a guilty conscience. Then you say $50 million, and the Iranian finance minister thought he was even exaggerating the amount, because he hesitated for a moment. In fact, that year he was the richest man in America, and if he had only made $50 million, that's impossible. Why did he hesitate? Why did he say $50 million? Later, he wrote about it in his memoirs. He really regretted it. Otherwise, he would have won long ago. Why? In his memoirs, Hunt later reflected, why did I hesitate and say $50 million? Damn it. He suddenly thought of the IRS. It was that simple. He was afraid that if he said too much, Americans would spread the word. Because if it got reported in the newspapers, in the US. You have to pay taxes for bragging. If you tell the Shah in Iran that you made $2 billion in a year, what about the taxes? That's why Hunt hesitated for a moment. So he said he made 50 million. This way, the IRS wouldn't come after him for back taxes. But then the Shah of Iran would look down on him. With a dead rat stuffed in your belt, pretending to be a hunter, you come to my damn lavish palace in Tehran to talk business with me? Fuck off. He got cursed out and kicked out. There was nothing he could do, and it delayed things for him. But at that time, Iran had a neighboring major country in the Middle East, also wealthy and rich in oil, Saudi Arabia. Even today, both Saudi Arabia and Iran are oil-rich countries, and it was the same back then. Saudi Arabia also had a king. Iran had a king too, Pahlavi, but Pahlavi drove him out. However, the king of Saudi Arabia was Faisal. Faisal was interested and took the initiative to reach out, saying, "Well, you can come to me. I have money too. Let's work together." The two agreed to sign a contract and start working in April 1975. See, no matter how well you plan, things never go as expected, on March 25th, 1975. It was just 1 or 2 weeks before they signed. This was a global sensation. It was a major event that affected the world financial markets. People today might not know about it. I was not even born yet. March 25th, 1975. The king was shot dead at a palace banquet by his schizophrenic nephew. Just like that. He died so abruptly, so lightly. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. King Faisal was originally a great king, but damn, he was just shot dead. After he was killed, people were like, hold on, how could it be him? Damn, he was a lunatic. They wondered why he came with a gun, but there was nothing they could do, so the matter was just left at that. So, the new king didn't know him, and wasn't interested in it anymore, so Bunker had no options left. Then he went to the east, saying they wanted to find Chairman Mao. Damn, Chairman Mao was too poor at that time, and besides, he was about to die. In 1975, Mao was either already dead or close to dying. So China was dirt poor. If they didn't go to China, who did they go to? They went to the Philippines. The big dictator in the Philippines was called Marcos. Not Musk, but Marcos. He also had a very beautiful wife. What was her name? Imelda Marcos. When I was a kid, on China's news broadcasts, they always talked about Marcos. He was the dictator of the Philippines. A president who came to power through a coup. He was short on money. So what happened next? Bunker said, "No problem, you don't need to have money. Sugar, there are sugarcane plantations in the Philippines. Right? You give them to me, and I'll give you 20 million ounces of silver. And then, didn't I just give you silver? You take the silver to Saudi Arabia, and you can directly exchange it for the oil and goods you urgently need. Meanwhile, I take your sugar refinery, and your sugar cane, and I can sell them for big money on the New York Mercantile Exchange. This way, everyone's happy." What is his real purpose? His real purpose is that he needs money. He knows Marcos doesn't have money, but Marcos has cane sugar, and cane sugar is as good as money. He wants to use 20 million ounces of silver to exchange for cane sugar. If this move works, his liquidity will instantly return, because he can make silver the global currency for international commodity trading. Previously, the main currency for commodity trading was the US dollar. Before 1975, it was the US dollar. But with this move, wouldn't silver also become a currency? Will they let him do that? Think about it. Who controls the US dollar? New York, of course. As soon as the International Monetary Fund saw this news, they immediately issued an ultimatum to Marcos. Philippines, if you go through with this, don't come to the IMF for aid or loans in the future. As a poor country, the Philippines had borrowed a lot from the IMF, so Marcos didn't want to risk everything for just this one city or one opportunity. You don't offend an entire river just for a ladle of water. So, President Marcos broke the agreement, and the Hunt brothers' capital chain was about to break. It's just like today, the price of silver, didn't it just rise to $6 or $7? And it dropped to 4. Isn't that the same ratio as today? From 6 down to 4. It went from 1.5 up to 6, then from 6 down to 4. You guys are so young, so naive. But recently, the price of silver hasn't gone up fourfold, right? It went from 1.5 to 6. That's a fourfold increase. And then it dropped to 3, which is a 50% drop, pretty much. And then, is that the end of the story? No, it's not over yet. He wants revenge. He's going to squeeze the shorts even more. Hunt is going to squeeze the shorts even more. Hunt was watching closely, and it was already spring. Spring passed, and it was already April. He returned to his hometown in Texas. He looked around Austin and Dallas. Wait, why aren't there any soybeans planted in the vast American farmlands this year? Soybeans are just what we call beans for soybean oil. The US usually plants a lot of them. It's a major commodity. But this year, none were planted. Aha! If nothing was planted, there will be no harvest in the fall. With no harvest, how dare COMEX keep trading soybeans? Haha, now it's my turn for revenge. You guys fucked with me. Y'all old monies. The establishment. The shadow government. The deep state. All in soybeans. Buy soybeans. But secretly, after the spring planting, he calculated that there would definitely be a soybean shortage in the fall, but increasing in the summer. And then in the fall, he suddenly revealed his hand, going all in on soybeans. With a big move, a single American investor can only buy up to 3 million bushels of soybeans. This is a trading unit. The two brothers, along with their relatives, together bought a total of 22 million bushels. All in. Time to deliver. That year, even the entire United States couldn't come up with 22 million bushels of soybeans. So the price of soybeans skyrocketed. Damn, they made a killing. At this point, COMEX started playing dirty, just like what's happening today with silver. Once I finish telling you this, you'll realize that today's market is just the same kind of dirty play. Today they dared to draw the line. So why didn't they dare to draw the line with Hunt? Because Hunt is also an American, he's not that weak. So what does he do? He turns to the law. COMEX took the Hunt brothers to court. Why did they sue them? And on what grounds? Because each of them was only allowed to buy 6 million ounces, but they used many proxies to purchase a total of 22 million ounces. This was considered an illegal method. Right? Isn't that so? It's like you're using someone else's ID. Of course, Hunter wouldn't accept that. Hunter said, if this were my first time doing this, I would admit it. All these old money families on the east coast of the United States, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, who among them hasn't done the same thing? So why the hell they have to sue me? Well, it doesn't matter. This time, they've just decided to go after you. So, this is what happened. The lawsuit dragged on and on, just kept dragging. By the time autumn passed and the harvest was over, the verdict came out. The Hunt family won. After all, everyone else had done the same thing. So they decided to let it go. Just forget about it. This was basically just playing dirty. Then the Hunts did the math. Because of this, the price went back down. But even so, the Hunt brothers still made $40 million. They didn't lose anything. Of course, the billions of dollars in paper profits were all gone. They made $40 million. But this created a deep-seated grudge. In 1978, things took a turn. Saudi Arabia's political situation stabilized, a new king took the throne, and 2 sheikhs came, since it's called a sheikhdom, right? 2 sheikhs came, and they brought money for the Hung brothers, because the Saudis believed silver prices would rise. So they decided to work together. So, in the British Virgin Islands, they set up a company called International Metals Investment Company. The Hunt brothers held half the shares, and the 2 Saudi sheikhs held the other half, 4 shareholders in total. They accumulated a lot of real money, and can you imagine? In 1978, it started again. Before 1975, the price went from $1.15 up to $6, then dropped back down to $3. In 1978, with the money from Saudi Arabia, they pushed it all the way up to $16. If you don't believe it, you can look it up yourself and see if the numbers went from $4, $3 up to $16. That's another fourfold increase. And Hunt wasn't done yet. It went up another 4 times. On the New York exchange, they were holding 43 million ounces of silver. As I just mentioned, he had already bought 5,500 ounces, and then he bought another 44 million ounces. In just a few months, the price of silver shot up past 16, just like today. All the financial groups in America went crazy and started buying in as well. It was just like now, everyone wanted to wipe out all the COMEX shareholders on the East Coast. They forced the old money groups to deliver, hoping to buy in, and through monopolizing silver, achieve an upgrade in their wealth. Damn, then COMEX is finished. As a market maker, COMEX has no physical silver to deliver. This kind of situation has happened again. By the end of 1979, the 2 exchanges, there was also one in Chicago and one in New York, combined only had 12 million ounces of silver bars left. Only 12 million ounces remained. The Hunt brothers had bought contracts for 43 million ounces. With others following their lead, there were even more buy orders. How could they possibly deliver? And the Hunt brothers were really ruthless. The Hunt brothers, they only accepted silver bars, no contract rollovers. As you know, rollover means giving the exchange a way out, basically. It's a delay. I know you don't have the goods, but it's fine. As long as you accept my price, the short sellers get liquidated and pay me, and I'll let the exchange keep running. If I make you deliver the goods, you're finished, because you'd have to declare bankruptcy since you don't have 43 million ounces. Okay, the Hunt brothers said, we want delivery. Damn, the Hunt brothers wanted delivery. They were going to set up the Dallas Exchange. So what happened at the end of 1979? It still hasn't happened today. COMEX, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They changed the trading rules. Buying was prohibited. Only selling was allowed. Today, the silver market still hasn't. Today, the silver market has already seen COMEX playing dirty tricks, drawing lines, but they haven't changed the rules yet. Back then, at the end of 1979, they did change the rules like this. Only selling was allowed, buying was not. From this day forward, all investors could no longer open positions to buy more than 3 million ounces of silver. All silver futures contracts, whether for near-term or long-term delivery, could not exceed 3 million ounces. None could. Moreover, the margin requirements were significantly increased. Originally, the margin was about 10 to 15%, but now it had to be raised to 25%. Only selling was allowed. Hey, increasing the margin means I'm taking your money. It's like I'm sucking your blood. The exchange does this because the margin is real money. You have to deposit, otherwise your position will be closed. So only selling was allowed, and for all contract holders with more than 3 million ounces in December 1979, they all had to be sold within 3 months, that is, before February 1980. Hunt immediately sued these assholes. He took them to court, saying that these exchanges were both the referee and a player. They must be on the other side of my trades. They're shorting. They're shorting, yes. Today, COMEX is still shorting, and they've become desperate. Why? Let me tell you, the history I'm talking about is exactly what's happening today. Right now, COMEX doesn't have enough physical silver for the longs to take delivery. And behind COMEX today, there are strong short sellers. Many American banks have put their money into it. If they don't crash the price of silver, American banks will go bankrupt. And of course, COMEX will also go bankrupt, because there's no physical silver. History never really writes a new script. It's always the same old story. Of course, later court investigations confirmed that the accusations from the Hunt brothers were true. The shareholders behind the Chicago Board of Trade and the New York Commodity Exchange were indeed large-scale holders of short positions. They made huge profits because they wiped out the Hunts, but that's the end of the story. By then, the Hunts had already lost. The problem was that the American courts took so long to reach a verdict. Several years, in fact. So by the time the truth came out, it was useless. The Hunts were already flat on their backs by then. Hunt stated directly in court that there simply wasn't that much silver in the market. Otherwise, these people would never have blatantly changed the rules like that. In December 1979, the Hunt brothers did not admit defeat. They kept buying together with the Arabs. You want to raise the fucking margin requirements, right? Fine. We will pay more. We will put up cash and keep increasing, keep opening new positions. 3 million ounces, right? I'll do 2 million, I'll do 2 million ounces, and I'll find a few more people. On the last day, December 31st, 1979, silver closed at $35.05. Was that crazy? What price did it start from? $4. It went up tenfold, 10 times in 2 years. Silver increased tenfold. Silver today isn't even this crazy, so they don't need to change the rules yet. At this very moment, the Hunt brothers. Through this joint venture, the BVI company's open silver positions had already reached 90 million ounces. And the physical silver they personally held in Switzerland had already exceeded 40 million ounces. Previously, they also had 55 million ounces, a total of 130 million ounces. And he also had a contract for 90 million ounces of silver, requiring physical delivery by March 10th, 1980. The whole world knew the Hunt brothers were bound to win, because as long as it reached March 1980, the COMEX would have to produce and deliver 90 million ounces of silver bars for me. Where on earth would you find that? There are only 12 million in total. So on January 17, 1980, after the rules were changed in December, they changed the rules again. They changed it again. Now each investor had a maximum holding and buying limit of 10 million ounces. So the 90 million ounce contract was voided. From then on, you could only buy and hold up to 10 million ounces. Any holdings exceeding 10 million ounces had to be forcibly liquidated within a month by February 18th. And what happened? The price shot up to $50 an ounce. Earlier I said it went up to 35, then it climbed to 50. Now that's a 15-fold, almost 20-fold increase. People kept buying. On paper, the two brothers had a floating profit of $3.5 billion. And that's $3.5 billion in 1979. The New York Comics Exchange, January 21st, 1980. Remember this date. On December 31st, 1980, the price of silver was $35. And December 31st, 1980. From $35 to January 21st, that's just 20 days later, it reached $50. The New York Comics Exchange announced it would stop trading silver. They were done playing. Damn, they stopped playing. Not buying, not selling anymore. The price of silver immediately dropped to $39, but it still stayed at a high level. Because at this point, the Hunt brothers had become enemies of the American establishment. Why? Because they had shaken the US dollar. And on March 14th, President Reagan appointed Paul Volcker as chairman of the Federal Reserve, and Volcker announced an interest rate hike to strengthen the dollar. Sound familiar? President Trump appointed a hawkish. On the day the new Federal Reserve chairman took office, what happened to the price of silver? What happened to the price of gold? Because the dollar was shaken by them, the dollar had to strengthen. If the dollar weakened, America would be finished. The US is built on the hegemony of the dollar, so Volcker announced an interest rate hike. Look at today. Let's see if there will be an interest rate hike today. Let's see today. This is going to be interesting. Let me tell you, in 1980, the Federal Reserve could raise interest rates. In 2025, 2026, if the Federal Reserve raises interest rates with the US stock market this high, the Fed is going to raise rates. As a result, the price of silver immediately dropped from $50 to $39, then to $21. Then, they drastically increased the contract margin. The Hunt brothers had to provide the exchange with a 100 million cashier's check as margin every single day. Even though the Hunt brothers were tough as nails, and Saudi oil was incredibly valuable, but playing like this, they just couldn't hold out. So they traveled all over Europe trying to get others to buy silver with them. But by March 25th, 2 months later, after 60 days, $6 billion in cash had been spent, and they couldn't hold on any longer. On this day, March 25th, Bunker called Herbert and said just one short sentence: "Let's give up." And so rumors spread rapidly through the New York Exchange. People saying the Hunt brothers went bankrupt. They're not going to pay the $135 million due today. By then, they have to pay $135 million every single day. These two had held on for 2 months. Aren't they the richest men in 1980? By March, that day when the money didn't arrive, silver prices plummeted. Within days, their futures accounts dropped to just 90 million. At that time, the chairman of COMEX, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, they stayed up for 24 hours straight, making sure to drive down the price of silver, preventing the Hunt brothers from raising any funds, and forcing them into bankruptcy. This is the power of a nation. This date is known in the financial industry as Silver Thursday. March 27th, Silver Thursday. On March 25th, they couldn't pay the margin. On March 27th, those three guys stayed up for 24 hours without sleep. On March 27th, the market opened at $15.8 and closed at $10.8. $10.8. The stock market also plummeted, and the Fed raised interest rates. The drop was about the same as silver's decline. In just these 2 days, the Hunt brothers not only lost everything they have, but also owing the banks $1.5 billion and declared bankruptcy. The war ended after 48 hours. In the end, the chairman of the Federal Reserve personally announced the Hunt brothers' bankruptcy and introduced a bankruptcy rescue plan. What is a bankruptcy rescue plan? It's basically a slaughter plan. The old money banking group on the East Coast of the United States, led by the Rockefeller family, took the lead. They offered $1.1 billion in cash to the Hunt brothers, but the condition for this $1.1 billion in cash was that the Hunt family had to mortgage all their premium assets in Texas, but including their football team, their other teams, and their real estate. All the top real estate in Dallas belonged to the Hunt brothers, including their ranches and dairy farms. Everything had to be mortgaged, with $8 billion pledged, and when the dust settled. Later, American financial professionals realized that the cash invested and poured in by the East Coast group was actually tens of billions of dollars, 50 or 60 billion, just like the cash the Hunt brothers put in. The amount of cash was surprisingly the same. In other words, both sides in that 1979 to 1980 Silver War, both sides used nearly $20 billion in cash to fight each other. In the end, of course, the Bulls lost, went bankrupt, and the Bears won. So after Bunker and Herbert personally went bankrupt, it actually took them 15 years to pay off the taxes they owed to the IRS. That is to say, it wasn't until 2003 that the old man finally settled this. The debt was finally paid off. By 2003, we had all grown up, and only then did the last traces of this war truly dissipate. So this tells us a few stories, a few truths that everyone should always remember. First, never trust the fiat currency system. Seriously. Fiat money can turn on you at any moment. It can act shamelessly whenever it wants. Never trust the US dollar as a piece of paper currency. The piece of paper is not God, it's just man-made. Gold and silver will always be a safe haven for wealth and the true targets for investment. You might wonder, with both sides fighting over real gold and silver, why does silver rise so much, and why are there still short sellers? Why are these traditional financial families, these old money families, always on the short side? What are you thinking? Because the assets are in their hands. Of course, they're the ones selling, so naturally they're on the short side. You're the one buying, so who do you think is selling? Whoever owns it is the one selling. That's why gold and silver have always been the safe haven for the world's truly wealthy families. They're all in their hands. If that's not the case, if we're wrong, then why did Rockefeller, the Federal Reserve, and the COMEX exchange join forces to wipe out those upstart Texas tycoons? Do you understand now? That's the first point. Gold and silver have always been the assets everyone chases after. Second, if your assets exceed $1 billion or even 100 million, you should have at least 10% in gold and silver. In chaotic times like today, just like before the 1980s, at least 10% was definitely in gold and silver, not in margin-based futures. Not in margin-based futures. Futures contracts can have their rules changed at any time. That doesn't count as real gold and silver. Third, never use leverage. The only way to beat those big sharks and old money is to pay in full and not take on debt. Because real gold and silver are a financial arena and gamble that even the world's wealthiest elites can't fully control. By not using leverage, you turn your holdings into real gold and silver. Whenever you use leverage, take out loans, or use margin, whatever it is. I've even seen people use 10 times, 20 times, even 50 times leverage. Before Chiang Kai-shek went bankrupt, he used 50 times leverage. I'm telling you, the big sharks will swallow you whole in one bite. This is a dumb move. Fourth, the world is diverse, and the world is filled with multidimensional information. You never know where crocodiles or challengers might be hiding in some corner. Even Wall Street and the establishment's deep state don't know, so don't put blind faith in them. Once you've made your decision and are holding on, just stop looking at it. If it wants to drop, let it drop. Not my fucking business.